It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story. An Israeli military officer is fired as an IDF investigation finds professional failures and breaches of orders led to the killing of 15 Palestinian aid workers in Gaza. Tonight, there are calls for an independent investigation.
There remains evidence that it may well be a war crime, and it's something that should be investigated as a possible war crime.
Also tonight, Ukraine calls on Russia to halt strikes on civilian targets for 30 days as President Putin's Easter truce comes to an end. The Pope greets crowds at the Vatican in his first major public appearance since he left hospital. Here, the King and Queen attend a traditional Easter church service at St George's Chapel in Windsor. And volunteers take action in Birmingham to avoid drowning in rubbish. Thus, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30. Good evening. An Israeli military investigation into the killing of 15 Palestinian aid workers in Gaza last month has found that there were a number of professional failures. The aid workers were shot dead by Israeli troops and then buried in a shallow grave. A Sky News investigation earlier this week revealed how the deadly attack unfolded, contradicting Israel's official account of the killings. Today, the Israel Defense Forces said there had been no attempt to conceal what happened, but said there had been breaches of orders and a failure to fully report the incident. Nicole Johnston reports from Jerusalem.
Professional failure, a series of operational mistakes. These are the findings of the Israeli military's investigation into its attack on a medical convoy in Gaza that killed 15 Palestinian aid workers. Israeli troops buried their bodies and the crushed vehicles in the sand. The military, under pressure to explain its actions, has released a statement. It says, the deputy commander failed to identify the fire truck and ambulances, blaming it on poor night visibility. He opened fire. The rest of the battalion followed. He has now been dismissed. The statement also said removing the bodies was reasonable under the circumstances, but the decision to crush the vehicles was wrong, and there was no attempt to conceal the event. At the heart of the matter is the identities of those killed. Israel again claimed that 6 were members of Hamas, but it has provided no evidence of this.
First of all, as the IDF said, and we've been gathering the evidence around this from the very beginning and taking our time to do so, is that 5 or possibly 6 members of the people that were in that ambulance have links to Hamas.
Sky News' own investigation didn't find any proof the medics were associated with Hamas. It was the video found on the phone of one of the medics killed that provided the first real evidence of what happened. It proved the convoy did have its lights on, and medics were wearing high-vis vests, contradicting an earlier statement by the military. Israel's story has changed since the bodies were recovered, and calls for an independent investigation are growing.
There remains evidence that it may well be a war crime, and it's something that should be investigated as a possible war crime, and it should be investigated by the International Criminal Court, which is the only international court capable of conducting a criminal investigation into something like this. The report that's been produced may engender in some people the suspicion that it's a whitewash, and what Israel needs to do right now is to take steps to avoid that inference becoming a conclusion.
In a briefing to journalists, the Israeli military said an hour before the convoy attack, it fired on a vehicle it thought was Hamas. It later discovered it wasn't. This investigation is no consolation for the families of the medics. The convoy had gone out, looking for a missing ambulance and its crew. By the end of the night, they too had all disappeared and never made it home. Nicole Johnston, Sky News, Jerusalem.
And if you scan the QR code on your screen now, you can watch 2 hours of terror, the Sky News investigation into how Israel's deadly attack on the aid workers unfolded. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has tonight proposed a pause on long-range drone and missile strikes into civilian areas for at least 30 days, with the possibility of an extension. Writing on X, Mr. Zelensky said, if Russia does not agree to such a step, it will be proof that it intends to continue doing all those things which destroy human lives and prolong the war. Meanwhile, the Kremlin says President Putin has not ordered an extension of the Easter truce he announced last night, with Russia and Ukraine accusing each other of breaching the ceasefire, which officially ended a few minutes ago.
I think it was a pass to President Trump saying, well, we still can negotiate, because we have seen over the last couple of days that the new administration representatives were getting anxious because the 100 days they allowed themselves to deal with the war are actually almost over. And so Marco Rubio was threatening to actually pull out from the situation.
And in the last hour, President Trump has written on Truth Social. Hopefully, Russia and Ukraine will make a deal this week. Both will then start to do big business with the United States of America, which is thriving, and make a fortune. Pope Francis has greeted crowds in St. Peter's Square as Christians around the world celebrate Easter. The Pope, who's recovering from double pneumonia, wasn't able to preside over Mass, instead appearing on the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica during the blessing at the end of the service. Emma Birchley reports.
There was no doubt the Pope would do everything in his power to play a part in the Easter Sunday celebrations. And when he emerged on the balcony, it was to the delight of the tens of thousands who'd gathered in St. Peter's Square, hoping he'd be strong enough. Francis did seem tired and weak, but still managed a few words.
Cari fratelli e sorelle, buona Pasqua.
Dear brothers and sisters, happy Easter, he said, before asking the Master of Ceremonies to read his traditional Urbi et Orbi message, calling for an end to wars and conflict across the world.
Si presti aiuto alla gente.
Including a ceasefire in Gaza and the release of Israeli hostages. It's almost a month since the Pope left hospital after a bout of double pneumonia left him fighting for his life. And despite being prescribed 2 months of convalescence and ordered to avoid crowds, the pontiff once again ensured he got close to the faithful who'd congregated at the Vatican.
He met with his doctors just the other day. There were about 70 medical doctors around him that he greeted to thank for all the work that they had done. And he seemed rather weak. He also met with prisoners at Regina Coeli prison the other day as well, on Holy Thursday.
It's a tradition he was intent on fulfilling, shaking the hands of inmates and giving them each a rosary and pocket-sized gospel. And when asked how he was doing during this Easter period, he answered, I am living it as I can. Before his Easter Sunday appearance, he also managed to meet with US Vice President J.D. Vance for a short exchange of Easter greetings.
I know you've not been feeling great, but it's good to see you in better health.
The Pope may still be recovering from his 5 weeks in hospital, but this was an opportunity to meet the people that he wasn't going to miss. Emma Birchley, Sky News.
Well, here the King and Queen have attended their traditional Easter Sunday church service at St George's Chapel in Windsor. They were joined by other members of the royal family, including Prince Andrew. Katie Spencer reports from Windsor.
Easter Sunday, for the royals, a time of faith and family. Not quite a three-line whip for attendance these days, but with the whole York family out in force, despite Prince Andrew stepping back from official duties, attention perhaps drawn to those notably absent, namely the King's sons. A relatable excuse from the Prince and Princess of Wales, opting for some quiet family time before their kids return to school. King Charles relaxed and at ease. What a difference a year can make. 12 months ago, the service was his first appearance after his cancer diagnosis. Today, in the spring sunshine, a sense of comfort perhaps for the monarch in the predictability of set moments like these coming around again. His cancer journey followed by those who travelled here.
He's looking a lot better than he was this time last year, I think.
We are so happy to see that the King is looking so well, and the Queen as well, and to see the entire family.
It was disappointing the Prince and Princess of Wales weren't here, but I'm sure that they're having a lovely time wherever they are.
Elsewhere, an unprecedented Easter address from the Archbishop of York, standing in to deliver the sermon in lieu of there being an Archbishop of Canterbury after Justin Welby's resignation, reflecting on the situation in Gaza.
He cries out in the voices of the hungry, the oppressed, the abused, and the vulnerable. He is waiting for us to greet him. We need the peace of Christ in our homes, in our streets, in our world, in Israel and Gaza, in the Ukraine, in Myanmar, in Sudan.
The King stopping only briefly after the service. In the months to come, a more complex meeting, with President Trump suggesting he could be here for a second state visit in September. Who he'll be introduced to, yet to be confirmed. Who he won't meet, perhaps a given. That drive to impress ahead for the royals. But for now, family coming first. Katie Spencer, Sky News in Windsor.
Campaigners who won the Supreme Court battle over the legal definition of a woman this week say they've been inundated with death threats and misogynistic abuse since the landmark judgment. On Wednesday, the UK's highest court ruled that the terms woman and sex under the 2010 Equality Act refer to a biological woman and biological sex. Amelia Harper reports.
It's been less than a week since these scenes outside the Supreme Court. Jubilation from women's rights campaigners after a ruling that the legal definition of a woman is based on biological sex.
All women's rights are human rights.
But now an ugly backlash against those who campaigned for this moment.
There's been a significant minority of really horrible, abusive messages. And most of them are age-old misogyny. They're calling us offensive names. They're threatening us with violence. They're just being abusive for the sake of it.
And some of them are even worse. You're a group of disgusting murderers and deserve death. God will rip you from your family one day and nobody will mourn you. Your inhumanity makes me vomit. You stupid women should feel deeply ashamed for being so stupid. The fight to protect sex-based rights led supporters of the trans community to march outside the heart of democracy.
Trans rights are human rights.
That was the message people here wanted to get across.
Trans rights are human rights.
7 statues nearby were covered in pro-trans graffiti, including suffragist Millicent Fawcett. The Metropolitan Police is investigating this as criminal damage. And a small number of these were seen in the crowd, a quite literal sign directed at people who agree with For Women Scotland. The Met says it's investigating signs at the protest, so far none deemed to have broken the law.
Discussions around this topic have become so polarised over the years that it seemed that there was no other way to address it other than for it to end up here in the UK's highest court. And in the days after the events inside this building, it's clear that tensions still remain.
And these are tensions that members of the trans community say they've experienced for years.
So I think we're kind of, too many of us are used to being targets of violence and abuse. And I mean, speaking personally, yes, I have received death threats and social media abuse and threats of intimidation as well.
As the dust settles, can the two sides agree on anything?
They genuinely believe that people are out to get them, and I wish that wasn't so. I would love to have a proper conversation with them.
It might not be what they think they are doing, but it is what they are doing. Would I talk to them? I can't see any common ground at this point.
It seems for now that answer is no.
Amelia Harper, Sky News.
A former prison officer has told Sky News that an attack on his former colleagues will stick with them for the rest of their lives. Hashem Abedi, who alongside his brother planned the Manchester Arena bombing, is accused of assaulting 3 officers at HMP Franklin in Durham. The attack has again brought the safety of those who work in the prison service into sharp focus, as our correspondent Molly Malone reports.
I've been assaulted, I've seen stabbings, I've seen colleagues get slashed or stabbed or have hot water thrown over them. Nobody's ever truly safe. Nobody is ever truly safe in the prison service.
Matthew used to work as a prison officer at HMP Franklin, a high-security jail in Durham, where last weekend his former colleagues were allegedly violently assaulted by Hashem Abedi, who helped plan the Manchester Arena bombing, which his brother carried out in a suicide attack that killed 22 innocent people. Abedi had been serving his sentence in a segregated unit at the Category A jail, prompting fresh questions about the safety of staff inside prison.
The mood in Franklin since the attack is very downbeat. I've spoken to colleagues who are ex-colleagues who I'm still friends with, and they've not discussed the specifics of the incident with me, but they've said it'll stick with them for the rest of their lives. And I've been there when you're mopping your colleague's blood off the... When you've seen a serious assault and you're mopping your colleague's blood off the floor and you don't know if they're going to be okay, and then 10 minutes later you've got to just get back on with your day and you've got to carry on running the regime. And it's difficult and it is awful.
There were nearly 10,500 assaults on prison staff in England and Wales in the 12 months to September, a 19% rise on the year before. Matthews worked in a number of different prisons and says it happens far too often.
The danger level is obscene. And the staff go in wearing nothing more than what I'm wearing now, a white shirt. So what kind of protection is there?
We understand Abedi was transferred here to Belmarsh Prison after the attack. It's considered one of the most highly secure jails in the country. But whichever prison he's in, the Prison Officers Association say that change is needed across the board to stop staff being at risk of violence.
Steve Gillen is General Secretary. He visited staff at Franklin and describes a mood of anger, frustration and sadness.
Spoken to many members of staff who were involved. We know the dangers in prisons, but the reality is there's no adequate protections for prison staff, and that's a great frustration. We've got to reset the agenda. They want stab-proof vests. It's unbelievable, isn't it, that prison officers who go about their daily business don't even have that protection.
The officers were said to be attacked using hot cooking oil and an improvised weapon. Prisoners had access to cooking facilities in the secure unit at HMP Franklin, which has now been suspended across the high security estate, while the government conduct a review into what happened, and the prison service look at whether staff should be given body armour to protect them. Molly Malone, Sky News.
Following the Easter weekend, the Birmingham Bin Strike will enter its 7th week next week, with no agreement between the union and council in sight. A major incident was declared in the city when refuse workers walked out over job cuts on the 11th of March. Now the community is having to work together to clear the streets themselves. Shimon Freeman-Powell reports from Birmingham.
It's been worse, but it's still a problem. Many of the black bag mountains have now been removed, but pockets of rubbish remain a stark reminder of the ongoing dispute. At Birmingham's Central Mosque, a temporary solution for a problem now entering its 7th week. Street cleaners working overtime to help relieve residents of their waste, many of whom have long grown tired of all the rubbish.
We haven't had recycling collections even before the bin strikes, so that's piled up. And there's probably like 5-6 weeks of recycling mainly, apart from other waste. We've had that collected, but it's just disappointing that we pay our council tax and there's mess and people fly tipping.
It's been honestly distressing because, the bins keep piling up and then we wonder if the truck is going to come and if not, what's going to happen. So over time, we found ourselves having to keep some of this dirt in the house, and if it's outside, then there are rodents.
Birmingham City Council says since declaring a major incident, 20,000 tonnes of rubbish have been collected and hopes the backlog will be cleared by this weekend. It's clear that the council's efforts have made a big difference. Just a week ago, it was hard to find a road that wasn't lined with black bin bags. But whilst much of the rubbish has now been cleared, there's still lots of litter that's left behind.
If we don't do it, we'll be drowning in rubbish.
Some residents say it's not just the council's job to remove the mess. It only takes Rashid's group a few hours to fill 20 bags.
I'm sure people feel down. It does affect your spirit. So like if this continues and it gets worse and we don't act as a community, we're just going to become more down and depressed. And summer's here. Let's just clean the area. Let's enjoy summer and come together till it's finished.
Birmingham City Council have praised community efforts and says talks that end the dispute will continue on Wednesday. But with the potential for strike action way into the summer, many residents here have little faith a resolution will be had anytime soon. Shimon Freeman-Powell, Sky News, Birmingham.
A woman has been stabbed to death in North London. Emergency services attended an address in Enfield at around 7 p.m. yesterday, following reports of a stabbing. But the 45-year-old was pronounced dead at the scene. There have been no arrests. Yemen's Houthi rebels say the US carried out a series of airstrikes on the capital Sana'a and coastal city of Hodeidah yesterday. The latest strikes follow Thursday's attack on the Red Sea port of Ras Isa, which killed 74 people. America's oldest serving astronaut has returned to Earth on his 70th birthday. Don Petit touched down in Kazakhstan with 2 Russian cosmonauts earlier today, having spent 220 days on board the International Space Station. Petit has now spent 590 days in space. Time now to get all the very latest sports news with David.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
Harry, let's take you back to your last job in Japan. Just talk to us a little bit about that experience, the success you had out there.
I had the time of my life out there. In Japan is such a beautiful country, beautiful people. The most exciting thing is the actual J-League. I think it's probably one of the most competitive leagues that I've worked in because they've structured it very well regarding with homegrown players to import players. They've got the right kind of mixture. When I went out there, the idea was to progress in the AFC Champions League. They were dominant in the league, but what they wanted to achieve was success in the AFC Champions League. And that's something that they failed to do. It was fantastic because what a wonderful experience we had out there. We got to the final, which was exceptional effort from the players, from the team, from the club, from the fans. Everyone pulled together. For the experience and for the club itself, they were over the moon of making an AFC Champions League final.
I'm interested in how that helped you to develop as a coach because that's an experience that a lot of coaches over here don't have.
I'm a firm believer in getting experience. I think everybody wants to coach at the highest level possible, and that's a dream of mine, to compete with the best managers in the world, and hopefully one day I can achieve that. But I also believe that you've got to go out and get experience, and experience from different cultures, different ways football is played. And I suppose my time up in Celtic, I got the chance to work with the Japanese players and the way that they love football and the way that they want to learn.
You mentioned Celtic there, so let's talk about that experience of being up in Scotland.
It was interesting because from an outsider, never being up there, you look at the Scottish League and you think, oh, well, it's always Celtic or it's Rangers. And you think, well, they win all the time. But working in that environment, you come to realise the actual pressure, especially from the Celtic players, the actual pressure that they're under.
How good is he, Ange Postecoglou?
He's different. He's different. But the fact that he allows you to go out and express yourself. I mean, there was times when you'd be at training and you'd want to stop it, but you'd be like, no, let them figure it out. Because that's what players do. And I love the way that he coached, and I watch him now, even at Spurs now, and I just think the way he plays the game, I loved. you know, just full out attack. And I would have loved to have played for him if I was 23. I would have signed up straight away knowing that all I can do is attack. The way that I saw him work up in Scotland, I just thought, well, that's something I can learn throughout my coaching career, to be able to manipulate certain things and work in that way. And I think he gives you the freedom. But that comes with a consequence, you know, because he wants that high press, that high energy, the high work rate. And again, that's the exciting thing.
There is no patience in football, but if Spurs are patient with him, will he bring success?
I really hope so, because it's shown. You know, even if you look at the rivals with Arsenal, and I think Mikel is done fantastic, and he started off, even though he won the trophy, he started off with a bit of a poor run, and words were questioned, and people were talking, no, he's not going to, but he was allowed that time, and now he's built a great squad. He's been able to fulfil that, and now he's pushing for titles. And I believe the same for Ange. He's proven he's got a track record of winning stuff, and I think if he's given time, he's be able to bring his players in and be able to really cement the ideas into what he wants into that team and be able to progress forward.
Liverpool on the verge of winning the title. Do you expect to see them lift the Premier League this season?
Look, I don't want to go yes, because you never know what can happen in the Premier League, because the Premier League is one of the toughest leagues you can win. They're in a very strong position. They make it difficult. They go long balls. They look for the second ball, and sometimes that's what you've got to do against teams. But what great teams go to show, and Liverpool are a great team, that you just got to keep pressing and wait for your opportunity.
What about Arne Slot, the job that he's done, his first season in the Premier League?
Fantastic. I don't think he could have wished for a better opportunity. I think it's harsh for what I'm about to say, is that it's kind of helped that Arsenal have had a terrible time, Man City have had a terrible time, Chelsea have not been up there, and no one's really kind of challenged him. But in saying that, he was fantastic at the start of the season.
Sky Business sponsors this report.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by the political journalists Theo Usherwood and Carolyn Quinn. Amongst the stories, we'll be discussing this on the front of the Times. Its headline: UK boosts munitions to end dependence on US. We'll be right back. Do stay with us.